What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Superhero Politics. I'm your host, Michael Holmes, and we're about to do some God butchery. Let's get to it. You were just listening to No Church in the Wild, Jay-Z and Kanye West, and this brings us to our topic for today. What's a guide to a non-believer is the title of this episode, and it's Sunday, and I went to church today. I do almost every Sunday. And I sang praises to the Lord, like I do every Sunday. And right after that, I came home, did some yard work, got all sweaty because it's really hot outside, really humid here in North Carolina. Then I went to the theater and I watched Thor: Love and Thunder. Now, I have no idea what people are saying about this film and some of the negative reviews that it has, but I thoroughly enjoyed myself, even more than I did so in Ragnarok. And I think a lot of it has to do with the introduction of Jane Foster, Mighty Thor, and this whole thing, man, this political environment that we have, everything is polarized. And so the introduction of the Mighty Thor, they called her Lady Thor, and they even addressed that in the film. For those of you who haven't seen it, it was a really great interaction between her and Gore in kind of the final, kind of penultimate battle. But that's not the topic today. The topic today is religion, politics, power, and ultimately the death of God, and how politics is killing God. Now, for those of you who have not seen the movie, Christian Bale plays Gore the God Butcher. And it is, a great character. If you guys have not, read The God Butcher, if you guys have not read, this story, it is an incredible story. It leads to the unworthy Thor, and it's just a super story. But just to kind of give you guys a little backstory, and I'm going to link this to religion and then politics. So we got superhero religion politics today. So it's normally superhero politics, but we got superhero religion politics today. So Gore is from a race of people in the universe. He's devoutly religious. And so I say religious in the sense of someone who prays to a deity. And he's devoutly religious. And his race is dying. They're praying to their God every day, and he's walking along with his daughter and praying every day to be delivered by God. And so his daughter ultimately dies, and then he comes face to face with the God that he's been praying to the whole time, and he finds out that the gods that he's prayed to this whole time have been absolutely nothing but callous monsters that play with the lives of their people. They see them as less than nothing. They look down on them, and they see them as less than nothing. And so Gore, when faced with the loss of everything, is seduced by the Necro Sword, or the All Black, and he ultimately destroys the God that he's prayed to his whole life. He he kills him. He's given the means, and he kills the God that he's prayed to his entire life. Now, we're going to parallel that because here's the thing. Here's the funny thing about it. You know, not funny, haha, but funny, ironic, or not funny, ironic, but kind of, you know, funny, aha. That's what I'm looking for. Not funny, haha, or funny, ironic, but funny, aha. So what makes this funny, aha, is that we've actually heard this story before. It has a little different twist and it went a little different direction, but we've heard this story before. Gore is Job. Now, for those of you who are scratching your head, you're thinking, Job from the Bible. Job from the Bible. And so when Job, who was a devoutly faithful man, devoutly faithful to God, had everything, blessings upon blessings upon blessings, had it all, had, you know, wealth and riches. He had a family, beautiful kids, like, you know, livestock, servants, everything. He had everything that you are supposed to receive if you praise God. And so the devil, Lucifer, Belial, Beelzebub, whichever, Mephisto, if we're going to keep this comic accurate, Mephisto goes up to the one above all. We're going to keep this in the comic realm. The one above all, and says, "Hey, let's have a little game." He says, "I can tempt anybody into cursing you." And the one above all says, "I bet you can't." And he goes, "Sure." He said, "You know, you know what? As a matter of fact, I'll let you pick. I'll let you pick your best guy, the most devout, the most dedicated, the most faithful person that you know. I'll let you pick him." And God said, "Hey, have you tried my servant Job? Have you tried him? Like, have you looked around?" And he was like, Job, he was like, "Oh, Job's got a lot of stuff, man." He was like, "I don't know if I'm going to try him." Why? Because he's got everything. Like, of course he's going to praise you. Of course he's going to worship you because you've given him everything. Why wouldn't he? And God says, "Well, okay, we'll make it fair. We'll make it fair. Like, you can take everything away from him. Like, you can do anything that you want to him. Like, you can absolutely make his life hell. But the one thing that you can't do is you can't kill him. Now, you can take everything else away from him, but you can't kill him. And I bet you won't be able to tempt him to cursing me." And the devil was like, "Bet." Mephisto was like, "Bet." And so he goes after him. And first he like sends storms and takes away all of his livestock. And he's like, you know, we'll get more. And then he starts to kill off his kids. And everybody was like, "Wait a minute, man. Like, Joe, what's going on? Like, why are you suffering all of a sudden? You've always had this, like, such blessed life. Like, why are you suffering?" And he was like, "Hey, man, I don't know. I'm just going to continue to pray. I'm just going to continue to pray, and that's it. I'm just going to continue to pray." And so when Job decided to continue to pray, despite everybody else saying, "Hey, dude, you probably should stop praying. Like, you probably should stop because apparently God has abandoned you." And he was like, "Nope, not my God. They was like, all right. So the devil was like, well, Dad, still praising. Well, what if we made him sick? So, man, like, we took his kids. He said, all right, I'm going to inflict you with like leprosy and boils, and we're going to burn down your house, and we're going to send your friends over to sow doubt in your mind. So his friends come over, and it's like, man, what did you do? And he was like, I'm going to do the worst thing that I can possibly do to you, Job. I'm going to take everything away from you, your kids, everything, but I'm going to leave your wife. And your wife was like, look, you sitting down here in the dirt. You was this once mighty man, had everything, and now you're here. Your body's inflicted with sores and boils and everything else, and you're down here shaving your head. You're in ashes. You're scraping your skin. It was like, dude, just curse God and die. And Job said, no. And despite all of that, he remained faithful. And the devil was like, hey, you got you a real one right there. You got you a real one, so I'm going to leave him alone. And so after all that, God rewarded the faithfulness of Job, gave him everything back. And Job was restored. Now, the reason why Gore is such a different story is because it went the other way. He had lost everything. He had lost everything. And when confronted with his faith, he realized that his faith was not going to get rewarded. And so he abandoned his faith. He renounced his faith. And he killed the God that he had served. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in relation to how politics is now the weapon that is essentially killing God. Now, not killing God, you can't kill God, but killing God in the minds and the hearts of the people of this country. Because now God is a weapon. God is a weapon that's being wielded by both sides of the political aisle to strike down the other side. But what's happening in the time is that God and the belief in God and the efficacy of religion is being eroded and destroyed in political debates. And so essentially, faith, or lack thereof, has now become the necro sword. Now, if you guys read the comics, if you guys have read the God Butcher, if you guys seen the movie, you realize that there is a weapon called the necro sword. In the comics, it's called the All Black. And you'll see it later on when you see, if you read The King in Black, which is the symbiote god Null, he has the necro sword, and it is capable of killing anything, any celestial being. The Celestials, like Galactus, Sky Fathers like Zeus and Odin, and then other gods like Thor and Ares and Hercules. It's capable of killing literally anything. And so the All Black, or the necro sword, is the weapon that Gore uses to slay gods. And so at his moment of crises of faith, unlike Job, he abandoned his. And the reason why this is now political, and the reason why the All Black has arisen in politics today, is because we have abandoned everything in our society, especially in American culture, is essentially predicated on our faith. All of our institutions are buttressed by our faith. They're undergirded and underpinned by our faith in that system, whether it be our system of government, whether it be our economy, whether it be our religious institutions, whether it be our systems of education, finance, Everything is just buttressed by faith. Our currency is buttressed by faith. And I don't know why I'm using the word buttressed. Like, I don't know why. But anyway, it just feels right. But anyway, it's underpinned by faith. Like, and that's as simple as it is. It's confidence. Some people will say confidence, but confidence is just another word for faith. And so when we lose faith in those things begin to lose power and they begin to erode. And it's just a vicious cycle after that. And so what happens is when we lose faith in our economic institutions, we go into recessions. The longer that crisis of faith in our political system, in our economic system go on, we go into depressions. Now, same thing. Right now, we're facing, if you're not watching the January 6th hearings, you are doing this country a disservice. Because you will never know. This country has never been closer to losing its democracy or the union being completely upended than it has on January 6, 2021, than it has since the Civil War. We were 40 minutes away from not being a functional democracy or a democratic republic. We were that close. Those people were this close to breaching those chambers and stopping Mike Pence from completing the peaceful transfer of power. That's how close they were to doing that. And so right now, the reason why those thousands of people and millions of people around the country believe that our election system is completely broken is because the faith in that system has been eroded by characters. Like, people have destroyed that for their own end. And the reason why I wanted to make sure that this today is superhero religion politics, because I wanted to squeeze religion in the middle of that, is because when we talk about faith in our institutions, there's no bigger institution in America than our religious institutions. You know, we're 370 some odd million people in this country, 30 or 40 million people in this country. And about 70% of those people would classify themselves as Christians. Now, the debate we're having, because the Supreme Court just overturned 50 years of precedent in Roe versus Wade, this was driven, a lot of this conversation, a lot of this decision was driven by Christian conservatives who had made abortion one of their flagship political issues. It was settled law, according to every justice that had been put on the Supreme Court since Roe was adopted in 1973. Every justice that had been put onto the Supreme Court had said, hey, it's settled law, it's precedent. We won't overturn it. And even the justices that voted to overturn it agreed. Even the new justices that were installed or confirmed, I should say, I guess, Freudian slip there, that were confirmed during the Trump administration all said that during the confirmation hearings. It's settled law. It is settled law. We don't see ourselves doing it. And literally, not even a year from the time the last justice was confirmed, Amy Coney Barrett, they overturned it. I mean, they leaked it 6 months before they actually did. So that means that the consideration for overturning Roe happened long before that, probably a year before that, probably immediately upon Barrett being confirmed to the Supreme Court. That means it happened almost simultaneously. She was confirmed while saying she was not going to overturn it. She was confirmed knowing full well that she was going to vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. And the reason that is done is because Christian conservatives in this country have made that their political issue. It is transformed from a religious issue of of difference of opinion about what the genesis of life is and when it is, until a political issue. Now, we'll get into why conservatives will do that sometime later in a later episode, but right now, we're talking about faith. We're talking about the faith community exercising its power over those who do not, and what it's doing to the faith community. So Gore, who renounced gods and said, I'm going to destroy you, I'm going to kill you all, he embraced and he took possession of the Necro Sword, or the All Black. Now, the downside to that, the double edge of the sword, is yes, he now had the power to kill any god, but the downside to that is that it was infecting him and killing him slowly. And that is what's happened politically to conservatives who have decided to use God and Christianity and religion as a weapon to achieve political power. And you say, well, okay, I get what you're saying there. I'm picking up what you're putting down. But where's your evidence? Well, in a recent study, it says that the fastest growing group of religious affiliation is actually non-religious affiliation. People are identifying as atheists and agnostics at the fastest rate in the history of mankind. There has never been a more a-religious population on this planet than we have right now. And I'm pointing this primarily at Christians because we're talking about the United States. Now, the United States has every religion that's ever existed on the planet within its borders. But most of those religions are not seen as active politically. Like, they don't go out and they don't lobby, they don't do things. Like maybe the Jewish faith and maybe, to some degree when we have, interfaith coalitions, have Muslims and Buddhists. But to much smaller degrees, most of these religions want to be able to practice their faith independent of government intrusion. They don't like, the Constitution says in the First Amendment, the freedom of or from religion. So that means I don't want you as a government telling me how to exercise my faith. And I, as a member of the faith community, shouldn't necessarily use my religious views to make laws. But that is no longer what's happening. Conservatives are actively saying that they're going to tear down the walls between religion and government. You have, individuals like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ted Cruz, who are saying, hey, yeah, let's get rid of the separation of church and state. You have the Supreme Court ruling that, football coaches can force their kids to participate in Christian prayers after the game. The Supreme Court ruled that. Now, that also opens up the viability of every other religion to now force participation. Now, we all know what's going to happen the first time a Muslim, calls for, a prayer to Allah in midfield and tells his kids, of probably mostly Christians, to come out on the field and get kicked off the team. We know how that's going to go, because we know that this was not really about the freedom of religion and exercising the freedom of religion. It's about the exercising of Christianity. Because guess what? These parents are not going to allow their kids to participate in Muslim prayer or Buddhist prayer or the Church of Satan. They're not going to allow their kids to do that. So what's happened is that people of this country, of all walks of life and all levels of faith, are started to witnessing the perversion and the infection and the corrupting of religion. And they are turning away from God because of it. They're going through the same crisis of confidence and conscience and faith that Gore went through. And unlike Job, who leaned into his faith, they're becoming more like Gore, and they're renouncing their faith. Now, you would say, well, these are just people. No. There's an entire side of TikTok. Now, if you're not on TikTok, I would have been one who would have told you to stay away from there because I didn't understand it. But since coming on TikTok, if you are not on TikTok, you are missing out on one of the most organic ways of communication that this world has ever seen. There's an entire side of TikTok of Christian pastors who are renouncing and leaving the faith. Why? Because of the politicization of religion. And their fear that politics is going to consume their faith. There's a pastor called Greg Locke who called for the death of Democrats. There's another pastor in Oklahoma somewhere that called for LGBTQ people to be lined up and shot. Ted Cruz just today or yesterday said that Obergefell, which was the ruling that allowed same-sex marriage, that it was a wrong ruling and that it should be overturned. And he is saying this, why? Because he has a right-wing religious Supreme Court that he knows will do it. And so what you're seeing is people are slowly starting to see that God is not in control of man, that man is in control of God, and they're wielding God like a weapon. But that weapon, while it's slaying laws that Christians don't like, it's also destroying the user. Why? Because Republicans, prior to the fall of Roe, it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to win the midterms. That governors, they were going to sweep governors, they were going to sweep the House, probably take the Senate. But since that's happened, the momentum in politics has completely shifted. Completely shifted. There was polls that were showing Democrats down 10, 12 points. Now it's showing them up 7 or 8. The Democrats are on the verge, possibly, of not only retaining the House and what would have thought to be, an unforeseen miracle, to retaining the House, and even looking like they're going to expand their Senate majority. Now, here's the irony of that, is that because of the fall of Roe may become law, codified in the law through legislation, which can't be overturned by a Supreme Court ruling. It can only be undone by Congress. So if there are 2 more Democrats in Congress, in the Senate next year than there are right now, where they can overcome a filibuster or an exemption or whatever they're going to do, they can actually codify Roe in the law. And so this religious bent that conservatives are going on is having monumentally negative effects, not only to their political power, but also to the institutional power of religion. Faith in our institutions, because of the embrace of religion, is at an all-time low. The Supreme Court right now, their approval rating is like at a 19%. It's below 20%. Houses of faith, the perception of religion in America is less than 50%, 45%, or even less. How people view religion positively. 70% want 70+% want to protect abortion rights. But yet, They're forging ahead in the name of God. Now let's just talk about that though. Our currency, our banking system, everything is predicated upon our faith. If we stop believing that this paper notes that we pass around has any value, we're going to go belly up. We saw this in the Great Depression. Now, in the Bible it says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So that means that you hope for things, even though you don't see them, you believe that they're going to come on the horizon. Now, I love that scripture. But it's becoming ever more apparent that that scripture, as a function of reality, is not permeating and not sticking in our society. Why? Because people only believe in what they can see and what they feel tangibly. And so here's the problem for Democrats, is that their party, even though they may feel afraid, even though they may fear what Christian conservatives are going to do because they've seen what they've already done, Democrats' voting base, is feeling dejected. Why? Because these things are happening and it seems like there's no way to stop them. And so they're asking for evidence of why they should continue to have faith in the Democratic Party when they see nothing. Now, obviously, this benefits Republicans. Democratic apathy. Because if we look at the majorities, if we look at the last 40 years of elections, we can understand why Republicans no longer have faith in democracy. They can't win. They can't win an election based on their ideas, based on their base numbers of their voters. They can't win an election. There's no way they can. And now their faith in the election system is toppled. Why? Because they're tired of losing. And they're not just losing elections. Think about what has happened up until this point to destroy the conservative movement's faith in democracy. Everything that they oppose has swept this country. First, it was integration. It was, if you want to go back that far, you're talking about the end of slavery. Then you talk about the end of Jim Crow. Then you talk about the civil rights movement. Conservatives oppose all those things. You're talking about women's suffrage. They oppose all those things. Labor laws. They oppose all of those things. Then you get into the more things based around religion. You get into Loving v. Virginia, which is interracial marriage. Conservatives oppose that on the bounds of their interpretation of religion that said that races shouldn't mix and intermarry. That failed. And then you get into Roe versus Wade, that allow women bodily autonomy to be able to terminate pregnancy. Christian conservatives oppose that because they said it was a full life. Then you get into Obergefell, which said that, two people of the same sex can have the same marital rights as a heterosexual couple. Then you get into, across the country, legalization of recreational drugs. Everything that Christian conservatives have opposed has passed. So they're looking around like, what the hell is this system? Why should we continue? And they're being told by their party that they're going to do all these if you keep voting for us, and the only things they ever get is tax cuts. Until now. So now, right now, maybe Christian conservatives have a little bit more faith in the system, in their party, than Democrats do. And so if you take that, you have crisis of confidence for two different reasons. You have crisis of confidence because you've been losing for a whole time. You have crisis of confidence because now this is the first time you've been cut. Democrats and progressives have literally won every battle since the inception of this country. Conservatives have lost every battle. And people will say, no, that's not true. They've won elections. The Republicans have Congress. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ideological battles. Progressives have won them all. Everything when it comes to changes for marginalized groups, for the progressives have won them all. They've swept them. And they've done it by winning elections. They've done it by having, stronger candidates and better policies. And they've done it by having more popular policies. They've done it by cultivating a more diverse electorate. They've done it by embracing minorities and marginalized communities and putting them to the forefront. They've done it that way. So that has completely destroyed the faith of the mostly white, mostly heterosexual, mostly poor, conservative, Christian conservative coalition that makes up the conservative movement in the Republican Party. That's dejected them. They are demoralized. So this is why January 6th happened, because faith is gone in our system. They have no faith that they can win an election straight up. There is no way the Republican Party is winning a popular vote in this country. They are not going to do it. The numbers aren't there. And then what happened in 2020, the last thing that the Republican Party had faith in, the last thing that they believed as their savior to be able to hold on to power, was the Electoral College, and Democrats picked the lock on that. They flipped 2 states that Republicans didn't think they were going to lose, Arizona and Georgia. Now, if you talk about pathways to power, Democrats have the entire interstate highway system, and the Republicans have one way. And the difference between the two gets wider and wider and wider, because the popular vote totals, even for a candidate as uninspiring as Joe Biden, was massive. The Electoral College difference, over 300 points. It's baked in for Democrats to have like 220, 225. It's baked in, like it's out of the gate. You can just chalk that up. You start with 225. And so that's why Democrats continue to ignore the extremism of the conservative movement and the Christian right, is because they are not yet convinced. Their faith in the system is not going. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing that may shake it. If you're watching the January 6th hearings and you see the preponderance of the evidence against former President Donald Trump, and now you have Attorney General Merrick Garland vacillating back and forth about whether or not it'll be bad for the country if Donald Trump is charged for treason or conspiracy to commit treason, and whether or not it would be a good thing if we jail a former president, since we've never done it, that's going to destroy Democrats' faith. That's going to destroy it. That's going to end. That may end the party. Because a lot of people fought because Merrick Garland was robbed of his seat on the Supreme Court by Mitch McConnell. And that shook the faith of Democrats everywhere. And now for Merrick Garland to be in a position to protect the Republic, and he refuses to do it out of some outdated tradition, that's going to destroy the Democratic Party. It's going to destroy the faith in the Democratic Party. So be warned. Don't listen to me, but be warned. But when you think about how Christian conservatism is using God, and how now people look at religion, and they look at the corruption in religion, and they look at the fact that now this corrupt entity is now moving and trying to destroy the protection between the barrier between it and our government, and going to infect that. It's like this creeping virus. And instead of people turning to God themselves personally, they're turning away. And these same people are saying, well, you're not American because, you don't love your country. And you're not a Christian because you're not advocating for this policy and you don't love God. And just like in No Church, in the wild, the hook says, what's people in a mob? You know, what's a mob to a man? What's a man to a king? What's a king to a god? And what's a god to a non-believer? So what's happening is people are rejecting God because of the application of religion. Religion itself, in an ironic twist of events, has become the all black. It has become the necro sword. It is killing our conscience. It is killing our faith in every institution. Why? Because those who would use religion to control others are forcing people to turn away. And now, those people who are standing to protect the republic, they have no faith. They have no faith to stand on. They have no faith in our religious institutions. Because these same people that are out here advocating to tear down settled law in Roe versus Wade, these same people who are advocating to tear down Obergefell and get rid of gay marriage, these are the same people that are talking about getting rid of contraception. These are the same people that are saying that there's no exception to for abortion, and even in the life of the mother. 10-year-old girl in Ohio had to go across state lines to get an abortion because she was raped and impregnated. A 10-year-old child. And even then, conservatives in this country questioned the validity of this story, even if it was real. Christian conservatives said, no, this can't be a real story. And then it came out that it was, and then they crickets. But then when you look at the people that are doing this, because they say that God would frown on this, Southern Baptists released a 500-page documents on 40 or 50 or 60 years of abuse and cover up for pedophiles in the Southern Baptist church organization. And we know about the long sordid history of the Catholic Church. And then you look around at these pastors with these multi-million-dollar homes and private jets. And when storms come, they won't even open up the churches to be a refuge for the people to come in from being washed away from flooding. But they demand your tithes every Sunday. And even now, some of the most powerful members of the faith community is coming out and saying that they were wrong on the issue of tithes. Yeah, we took your money for 40 years, but nah, we're wrong about that. So it's destroying the faith of the people of this country. Why? Is because there is no more lines between our political system, our economic system, and our religious system. They've all become blurred together into this dangerous soup of corruption and evil. And what we're witnessing right now is the rise of a bunch of Gores and the death of a bunch of Jobs. And so now when confronted by a mob that rushes the Capitol, confronted by a would-be despot and dictator, confronted by people who challenge you in your love for God, if you don't fall in line with them, you have people that are saying, what's God to a non-believer? Folks, if we don't find a way to restore the faith in our institutions, we as a country, we're damned. We are damned, to put this in a biblical sense. So, I'm asking that you guys listen to this, find some faith, whether it be faith in one another, faith in who you pray to, faith in the future, our generations coming behind us. But don't give up the faith. Don't give up the fight. Because if we get weary in well-doing, we will not receive our reward. So it's incumbent upon us to continue to fight the good fight and keep faith and hope alive. I pray that you all are well. Thank you for being with me. This is Michael Holmes and Superhero Politics. And until next time, be a hero to someone. Be a hero to yourself. You don't have to be super to be a hero. See you soon.